have a invisible boundary around themselves when they're speaking to you about a specific topic or situation or maybe their time. In this video, I'm going to share with you what leaders need to say when they need to set boundaries. Now, we're going to focus specifically on the time boundary today and go into what you can start saying as a leader that will help you be able to navigate your time a bit better when you need to set those boundaries. Now, I do want to know from you, what kind of boundaries do you need to set specifically as a leader? Is it with your time? Is it with your money? What is it? What boundaries are you struggling with right now as a leader? And let's talk about them in the comments below. Now, as I mentioned in several of my videos, and if you are just new to me, my name is Dr. Jacinta, and I did literally almost an entire month of boundaries. We talked about boundaries for the month of December of 2025. If you take some time and look at my live tab, you will see that most of the lives are about boundaries. There's a lot of detail we go into in terms of specific type of boundaries you may want to work on, whether you are in my direct target audience. I provide executive coaching and consultation services too, which are women in leadership, or you may be outside of that audience. You may be a man in leadership or someone that is thinking about leadership, but you're not quite sure just yet. You're going to learn a lot of information from the Boundary series and from the channel. So you're welcome to subscribe if you like the content so far. What happens a lot of times with leaders specifically when they're trying to set those boundaries, one of the first things that leaders have to do, or what they do, is they are very much in tune and very much aware of themselves and what they need. Most of the time, people struggle with their boundaries because they don't know what they need. And oftentimes, we don't take the time to know what we need. I realized this when I was working with my coach for the first time, and I started to understand how working with an executive coach can truly give you that time that you typically do not have on your own to really think about what it is that you need. So leaders themselves are very clear on what they need and what they need to get done, and specifically what their limitations are. Now, if you are not sure about that and you're a woman in leadership, you're welcome to reach out to me for an executive strategy session in the description below or at my website at exciteexcellence.org. We'll come up with a plan for you so you can start setting those boundaries. So, as I mentioned, leaders know what they need as it relates to their boundaries. The next step of that is leaders learn how to communicate their boundaries. Now, what leaders tend to do is they are a bit more concise when they speak as it relates to their boundaries. How many of you have ever been in a situation where you felt like you needed to say a boundary, you needed to define a boundary, but you felt like you just need to tell them? You just need to tell them as much as you possibly can so that they will approve your boundary. Let me know. It happens a lot, but leaders do not do that. I want to say hello, and welcome to those of you who are joining the live today. Let me know what questions you have about setting boundaries in terms of what you want to say. And also let me know what part of the big, beautiful world you are joining from today. Leaders are more concise. They're very, very concise with those boundaries in terms of what they want to say, how they want to say it, and when specifically they want to say it. Now, there's a couple of phrases that may help you as a woman in leadership, or maybe you are a man in leadership, to learn how to speak and say certain phrases and words when you need to set boundaries. Are you ready? There's a couple of these you want to write down. Before I go into those, let me see what's in the chat. We have Teresia Whitaker. I believe I said your name correctly. I hope so. If I did not, I'm so sorry, but welcome to the channel. Hope you're doing well today. Let me know what part of the big, beautiful world you all are joining from today. And what questions do you have about setting boundaries? What kind of boundaries do you feel like you need to set so we can talk about them? As I mentioned, leaders are very concise with their boundaries. And a couple of phrases that you may want to say when you are trying to set boundaries includes the following. If you're speaking to someone, and let's say your boundary, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the live, we're focusing on time. You just do not have the time to interact, or you have other things you have to do as a leader. You got to take care of a few things. this is what you can potentially do. You could say, I have a meeting that will buy you some time to where you can set your boundary. You can also say, I have a prior commitment. There's something else you had already planned. That's something you can say. You can say that you're working on a project. That's a way you can set a boundary with your time. You don't have time to do something. You have other things to do. You can also say you are planning a new initiative that will help you buy some time to give yourself a boundary. Those are just a couple of examples of what I've heard leaders say. I've used these personally myself to find out what is the word you need to say when you need to set your boundaries. Now, I talked about this a little bit this morning. Many people struggle with setting boundaries, and oftentimes women in leadership sometimes struggle with boundaries too. If you want to learn a bit more in terms of what I discussed specifically, you absolutely want to watch the live video from this morning that talks about women and boundaries. When leaders are talking about their boundaries or explaining their boundaries, they are not going into a lot of detail. They are going to say the very minimum amount of information they need to share with you as it relates to setting their boundaries. Why? Because boundaries inherently are very personal. And there may be something that you have going on specifically in your life that perhaps you don't need the entire world or business to know about. And so this is something that you want to make sure that you're providing as little detail as you need to, just enough detail to give them some insight in terms of specifically what it is that they need help with in terms of setting those boundaries to help you be able to do what you need to do on your end. Now, boundaries are so important. Many people struggle with boundaries. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to say it. And if this is something you need some support with, then contact me. Give me just 1 second. My daughter is at the door and I don't know what she wants, but hold on just 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. She wanted a cookie, so that's why she was banging on my door. All right, I want to say hello to Richard Smith II. Hello, Richard. Good evening, friend. How you doing today? Richard says, greetings and happiest of Thursdays, buddy. Well, thank you, Richard. High five, friend. Hope you're doing well today. So we talked a little bit about what you want to say when it's time for you to say your boundaries. You have a prior commitment. You have a meeting you have to go to. You have a project that you're working on, etc. Remember, leaders are very, very, very concise when it comes to talking about themselves and boundaries. You do not need to tell the person you're trying to set your boundaries with everything that's going on in terms of why you need to set these boundaries. You don't want to do that. You definitely want to be the person that says less, because you don't want people in your business like that. I've done that many times over the years, especially when I was in senior level leadership roles. And even now, I'm very much focused on what I have to say. What's the most I need to say? What do I really not need to say? And when you're setting boundaries, because as I mentioned earlier, inherently it's very personal to you, just know that you don't have to explain yourself. Many people struggle with setting boundaries because they feel like, one, it's a conflict. Okay, it's a conflict that's going to happen. Boundaries sometimes are associated with a struggle, a conflict, or something like that, and they don't need to be. But then two, people feel like because it's a conflict, or it might be challenging for the other person to hear, they feel as if they have to explain everything, tell them everything, just to justify why they need a boundary. And you don't need to do that. Especially as a leader, you do not need to justify your boundaries with people. It depends on what you feel that is appropriate to say and what is not appropriate to say. And if this is something that you're wondering about or struggling with, feel free to leave me a comment and let me know. I will help you any way that I can to give you some insight so that you can set those boundaries to have that balance in your life that you need. Many people struggle with boundaries and struggle with life. They struggle with burnout and etc. because there's some boundaries that we are not willing to say or we're not willing to address. And the purpose of this video really is to help you to at least have a couple of words, a couple of statements that you can use when those situations come up, so that you can start putting some boundaries on your time, especially when you're at a situation where your time you feel like is being taken advantage of because of the work that you're doing. These are a couple of strategies that have helped me over the years. I hope that it gives you some insight of some things to think about too. Leaders are very concise, when they're talking about their boundaries. They plan ahead. They know exactly what they need and what they don't need. Another thing that leaders do when they are communicating boundaries is that they are able to leave the conversation in a bit of a silent mode to get their point across. Now, why is this important? Boundaries are difficult topics. People do not want to talk about boundaries. They don't want to set boundaries. Sometimes they struggle with them. If you are able to communicate as a leader, one, you already know what your boundaries are. You know what you need. Two, you're able to speak about it in a concise way. And three, you have the ability to use silence when you communicate your boundaries. Automatically, it puts you ahead of everybody else as a leader because people in general struggle with silence. I talk about this a lot on my channel. There's several videos here that will help you to navigate silence and eye contact and etc. But I talk about this a lot, and in my very humble opinion, there are typically three major areas of communication that a lot of people struggle with. Now, there's a lot more other areas of communication that people struggle with, but my top three are eye contact, facial expressions, and silence. If you can master any of these or all three of these areas that people struggle in, you are automatically going to be setting yourself apart as someone that truly communicates confidently and concisely under pressure, which is the purpose of my channel. When you communicate your boundary, use silence. When you say your boundary, I have a prior commitment, I'm not able to attend, I'm working on a project or whatever the case may be specifically. After you say it, thank you for the heart emojis. After you say it, just stay silent and observe the person in terms of what they are trying to say. Let me look in the chat. Cat 23rd, welcome, Cat. Good to see you again, friend. Cat says, hey, Doc, sorry I'm late. No problem at all. No problem at all, Cat. Glad to see you, friend. Welcome back. These are statements that you can say and strategies that you can use that will help you be able to say your boundaries as a leader. And for those of you just joining, welcome, welcome. I appreciate the thumbs up and the likes on this video. It does truly allow the video to reach out to more people. So I appreciate you all so much. Kat gave a wave back. All right, fantastic. We talked about a couple of things. We talked about what leaders do to set boundaries. And for a recap for everyone, the first thing leaders do when they set their boundaries is that they know exactly what boundaries they need to set. They know what they need. And that really is the beginning, because sometimes we are so busy in life, we have so much going on that we just simply do not know what we need. We don't know what we need, how we need it. We just don't know. And I shared with you personally, for me, what helped me to learn about my boundaries and what I needed was working with an executive coach. Hands down, that was one of the most important decisions I made in my life, to work with a coach, even though I am a coach as well. But having that quiet time that's 100% focused on me, for me to think about what it is that I need, what am I struggling with, how do I get over it, it will completely change your life. And you will be so surprised how far and how fast you will move in your life if you work with a coach. Now, of course, I'm an executive coach and would love to work with you specifically, but I'm just sharing my experience working with a coach. My life moved a lot faster when I was working with an executive coach than prior to when I was not. So having that quiet time to really define, what do you need? Now, sometimes you may think, oh, I can figure that out. And sometimes you can. You absolutely can figure it out. But sometimes you need structure support to help you start thinking about it in a different way to where you actually can make movements. Because sometimes what happens is that we think about these are the boundaries. This is what I need. I think I need, but there's sometimes is something else. There's something underlying that is preventing you from taking that step in the boundaries. So you can sit at home and write on your paper or type on your phone and say specifically, this is what I feel like I need. But then when it comes down to the time for you to actually say something about it, you freeze and you don't say it. And so an executive coach or myself, my role would be to figure out, well, what is that? What is it specifically that's preventing you from trying to move forward? Second is leaders are very concise in terms of how they communicate when especially as it relates to their boundaries. Less is more, less is more, less is more. You do not need to explain your entire life in terms of why you're setting boundaries. And finally, making sure that you use silence when you set your boundaries, when you speak your boundaries, let the other person respond and use some of those strategies I share with you on this channel to observe them so you can get a sense as to what is this person thinking. This allows you to start learning how to read people so that you can respond back to them in a very appropriate way. All right, in the chat, Kat says, define role clarity, address boundary violations promptly and professionally. Absolutely, Kat. That is a very good point. And we've been talking a bit more about boundaries as it relates to setting them if you have something going on time-wise and personally and etc. But what you mentioned is really very, very important. You do have to address boundary violations fast, very, 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 very fast and professionally. Why? Because a lot of times, and let me know in the comments below if you've ever experienced this. I've seen it where, thank you for the heart emojis. I've seen situations where there has been a boundary that's been crossed professionally and nothing was said. And then what happens next? That boundary is crossed again. Nothing said. Then that boundary is crossed again and nothing said. And then finally, the person who has been violated in terms of their boundaries gets really fed up. And then at that point, they get very upset, they get very angry, and they just completely just blow up and go off on that person. And the person's like, wait a second, where did this come from? I was talking to Susie and she just went off on me. I was talking to John and he just went off on me. And people sometimes wonder, well, why? Like, what happened? If you do not correct the boundary, as Kat mentioned, very quickly and professionally, people will think it's okay for them to communicate with you or treat you in that way. Now, there are some people out there that are just flat out disrespectful and rude. There are people out there. However, what I have seen that happens a lot, especially with some of my clients I work with, when they're trying to define their executive presence, position themselves as highly credible women in leadership, what I see that happens a lot of times is that there have been moments or situations or circumstances or scenarios that have happened in the past where the individual has allowed someone to walk all over their boundary and they didn't say anything about it. And they find themselves in a situation where they need to reset their boundary. And they are struggling with it because they do not know how to do it because they don't want to be that person that is deemed as aggressive or rude or mean or nasty and all of the above. But you still have to set it. But there's a way you can do it. Even if you've made that mistake, it's okay. That's why you subscribe to the channel. It's all right if you make that mistake. You can revert back, but it's going to take a little bit of time to do that. Now, many of you know that I like cars. I like vehicles. And so imagine if you're driving a car and there's no power steering fluid, right? Or you're low on it, you're going to have a really hard time turning that car. This is the exact same thing that happens when you are trying to reset your boundaries and your boundaries have not been set before. Can you do it? You can. It's going to take a little bit of effort to do it. And so that's why if you're a woman in leadership and you're struggling with this, definitely reach out to me for an executive strategy session. We'll come up with a plan to help you be able to define those boundaries and come up with a really great way for you to still communicate those boundaries, still be highly professional, but just help people understand this is the way you need to be communicated to. These are the things that will violate my boundaries. This is what I think is more appropriate in terms of how to communicate, etc. You can do it. So if you've made that mistake, I've made that mistake before in my career and I had to reset boundaries too. It's okay. We can figure it out. We will figure it out. All right, Kat says, can you reiterate boundaries when tested without apology? It depends on the situation, but yes, I would say absolutely you need to reiterate your boundaries when they are tested without an apology. I would say, so if you have a situation coming up where somebody says they crossed your boundary, Kat, and they did not apologize for it, because I believe that's what you're referring to, you absolutely can reiterate that. And I would, and there's certain ways you can do it. I know we talked about this here, it feels like recently, but if you have a situation where someone crosses a boundary and you've already told them about this boundary, you have to remind them about this boundary. So for instance, I'll give you an example. If you are in any role as a leader, maybe you're a W-2, maybe you have your own business, or maybe you're doing something else, and you have, let's say, a client, a professor, a coworker, a manager, a boss, or whoever, that for some reason just wants to, thank you for the heart emojis, wants to keep talking to you and communicating with you after hours. This could be potentially a problem. And you have to reiterate that boundary. Because what I've seen happen, and I'm telling you this from my own personal experience, because I used to do this. I've been in a situation where I've had to communicate with people after hours, and they just expect you to respond. When I was a W-2 and a senior leader, and what would happen is people would text me, and most of the time I would respond back pretty quickly. But then there was a point in my journey as a senior leader where I became very burnt out, and I was just over it. And I decided, after working with an executive coach, that there were certain situations that are fires I need to deal with, and there's certain situations that can wait until tomorrow morning. And so what would happen is the people that would text me all the time and contact me after hours, they would be upset because I didn't respond to them. And I had to reset that boundary, just as I mentioned earlier. It was a little hard for me to do it because people knew that I was pretty responsive majority of the time for years. And I started to slow down on my response because I knew I needed some time. And that's, as I mentioned, the first thing leaders do is they know what they need. I knew that I needed to disconnect my work from my personal life or after hours life. So what did I do? I would not respond to messages. I would glance at it and make sure it wasn't like a catastrophic fire, like a building's on fire, like something happened. I have to deal with that. But if it was something very minor, asking a question about something, it could wait till tomorrow. And when I would see that person, I would either respond in the morning when I was at work or on my way to work in the morning. I would do it a little bit before hours if I could, or thank you for the heart emojis, or I would just respond when I got to work. And sometimes people would say, did you see my text message? Did you see my text message? And I would say, I appreciate you sending a text message. It was after hours and I have to respond to it the following day. I have other commitments in the evenings. Exactly as I mentioned earlier, those are the exact statements that I've used. I've heard other people use also. And if you need to take a look at those, I mentioned those a few minutes ago in the live. But Kat's right. You can reiterate your boundary when it's tested without an apology. Because sometimes you're going to have situations when you've told somebody, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and they keep doing it, then when you tell them in a very firm way, I told you not to do this, you wouldn't specifically say that, but in your mind, you'd be thinking, I told you not to do this, then sometimes you just have to say it. And if it hurts their feelings, I'm sorry, but you've already made it very clear. As long as you've been consistent with that boundary, then they have pretty much brought this on themselves. If you're consistent with it, that's the key to boundaries. And it is a big big factor in developing your executive presence is you have to be consistent. Be that same person. Set those boundaries. Don't let it fall to the side and just ignore it. Thank you for the heart emojis. Don't do that. I've seen so many people lose their executive presence. I've had clients of mine building their executive presence, building it up, and then they find themselves in a situation where they start talking about random things they did over the weekend with their friends and with their colleagues at work, and it gets a little bit unprofessional, and then they go right back to where they were, and they have to kind of work themselves back up because the people they're communicating with are thinking, oh, it's okay if we talk about what we did over the weekend and how we did it and when we did it and all this stuff. That person's okay with it because we talked about it. But that person in actuality is really trying to enhance their executive presence, and they don't want to be associated with that, but they end up being associated with it because they just decided not to be consistent. So that's really important too. Kat says, say no or not now to low priority requests. Absolutely, Kat. You can say no, not now. You can say it in a maybe not direct no, but you get the point. You get that there's some things, especially if it's low priority, you do want to negate those if you can. I would just say and we kind of talked, I think you may have missed this part. There's a couple statements I mentioned earlier that you can say if it's something going on timing wise and you just don't have the time for it. I have prior commitments. I have a meeting. I am working on a project. I'm working on an initiative or something like that, so that when you're saying it, and this is just for anyone, you can use those statements, it sounds a bit more polished instead of just saying absolute no. Because sometimes when people hear no, no is not necessarily a positive word. It's a no, stop, no. And sometimes when you can say no, depending on the situation. Sometimes you flat out need to say no, especially if it's something that can be a situation where someone is trying to cross your boundaries, as you mentioned, and you're trying to be nice, but you're at the point, I don't want to apologize for this anymore. No, but trying to say it in a way to where it sounds maybe a bit more direct, but maybe a bit not as blunt as no is okay, but just know sometimes you do have to say no, not now, depending on what's going on. All right, so we talked about a couple of ways, couple of strategies that will help you if you are trying to communicate your boundaries as a leader. A few things leaders do. As I mentioned, for almost the entire month of December, I believe even going into January, we talked about boundaries and boundaries and boundaries again and boundaries some more. So if you have ever had questions about boundaries, setting them, talking about them, learning about them, I highlighted the 5 boundaries that I felt like everyone should start working on for 2026. Take a look at the lives in December. You'll just see a bunch of lives that say boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Just pick one that you figure out that will be very helpful to you, because it will give you a lot of great insights for you to consider. I want to say hello to Jeffrey Fisher. Hello, Jeffrey. How you doing today? Jeffrey Fisher says, amen. Well, appreciate that. Hope you're doing well. Let me know what part of the big, beautiful world you are joining from, and welcome to the channel, Jeffrey. I have not seen you here before, at least on the chat. So we talked about that. So boundaries are really important. Take a look at the live tab. There's so many videos that talk about boundaries that will help you. If you are new to my channel specifically, and it's the first time you have visited me, welcome. And if you're one of my subscribers, my amazing subscribers, welcome back, friends. And I'm glad you're here. Take a look at a couple videos on my channel if you're trying to develop yourself, if you're trying to communicate more confidently and concisely in those very high stakes, high pressure situations, such as interviews, salary negotiations, board presentations, business meetings, difficult conversations, you name it, where the stakes are high. This is the best channel on YouTube for you to follow. Take a look at a couple of videos that talk about thinking on your feet, your tone of voice, body language, eye contact, managing your emotions under pressure, and boundaries is a good one too. But any of those videos will give you a solid foundation in terms of ways that you can start incorporating these more high stakes, high pressured strategies into your everyday conversations so that you can be more prepared when those contentious situations come up. There's so much that you can learn and there's a lot to take in, but the more we spend time with each other and the more we talk or you ask me questions, you'll start to get a sense of, oh, okay, I probably need to say this or I don't need to say that. I may need to say this now, or this is definitely not the right time. These are things you start to learn, but you have to be exposed to it, if that makes sense. Be around someone that has been in those situations so that they can give you some guidance in terms of when you might want to say something or you may want to wait for a little bit. There's only but so much I can do, of course, communicating with you via phone and via video, depending on what part of the world you're in. If you're a woman in leadership and you need some specific support, you're going through something, you're trying to elevate how you are communicating or advancing your career, you're always welcome to reach out to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and of course here on YouTube as well. Just leave a message in the comments below and I will do a video just for you, depending on the depth of the topic, and give you a shout out. But if you need some support, you need some real customized support to help you actually move faster, then that's when we work together in a one-on-one or in a group setting, depending on if you are a leader in an organization or you are a business owner and you're trying to get your team to communicate at a higher level. Either way, I'm here to support you. I appreciate the heart emojis. So let me know, what are some topics that you all want to learn a bit more about? Tomorrow is Friday. Friday is Q&A time, and I have a bit more time Friday evenings to do Q&A. I am going to be available tomorrow morning and tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening, I may not be live as long because I'm actually working on the ebook that I promised many of you. It is going to be a free ebook that I'm going to provide to my audience. There's a couple votes that came in. I haven't looked at YouTube's votes just yet. I looked at it earlier. So the topics that are going to come up in the ebook are going to definitely be high stakes conversations and communication under pressure. That was a big one that came up. There's another third topic that came up on LinkedIn. I'm going to probably put that in the book as well. But I'm working on that because I do want to have that released here very soon. And it should be a great way for you just to have a checklist of things to keep in mind when you're walking into these high stakes conversations. Because now when we talk about it, I'm sharing with you just knowledge as I've gained it over the years. But I understand that sometimes you just need everything brought together to say, okay, I have a high stakes conversation. For instance, I have an interview, I have a salary negotiation, I have a board presentation, I have a really hard conversation I have to have with my colleague, my friend, my business worker, my instructor, my team members, etc. You just want to have something to kind of put together and say, okay, I got this, I got this, I got this, and I need this, and I probably need this too. So just to put it all together, I know we talk about so many things here on the channel, but I want to make sure it's very structured to you. Okay, Kat 23rd says, future live sessions, can we work on decision-making boundaries and boundary violations and how leaders respond? Absolutely. So let me take a screenshot. We can definitely talk about that, Kat. Sorry, I hit the wrong button. I apologize. I did not hit that. Okay, so yes, we can definitely talk about that. And I would say decision-making boundaries. Okay, for that one, I believe, and let me know, Kat, because I want to make sure, because I definitely want to make sure I'm answering your questions. So for decision-making boundaries, there's different ways that I go about doing decisions or think about decisions that I've seen a lot of leaders do. And so maybe if you're leaning more toward those boundaries, are you talking more about how to make those decisions in terms of, should you make this decision? Should you not make this decision? Okay, let me see. Cat 23rd says reversible versus irreversible decisions. Okay, fantastic. Now I know what you're talking about. So yes, there's definitely a lot that goes into that specifically, because there are decisions that are reversible and there's some that are irreversible. So how do you make that decision-making tree? Will be probably helpful. I appreciate you mentioning that, Kat. I'll definitely do a video for you on that, and we'll give you a shout out on that, of course, as well. So we have the decision-making boundaries, boundary violations, and how leaders respond. Yes, so we'll talk a bit more about that. Boundary violations is a good one because a lot of times it comes down to the difficult conversation. So I'll talk a bit more about what you want to do in those situations and reference my difficult conversation videos, but we'll go into specifically some things you can say, or I'll even share with you times where I've had boundaries violated and I've had to stop and definitely let someone know you're crossing the boundary, you're crossing the boundary, you're crossing the boundary. And you just have to be prepared. As I mention all the time on my channel, any conversation you have can go under pressure really quickly. And the key is just to be prepared for it in the event that it does, and to have your data together, just be on top of things. But we'll do some sessions around that specifically. Cat 23 says, appreciate it. Absolutely. And if there's any other topics, Cat, you want to learn more about, you know I'm here for you, friend, to help you any way that I can. If you are watching the replay, feel free to let me know what topics you want to learn more about. There's a couple of things. I've been working on this for a while, and I'm trying to get everything where it needs to be. There's a few things I'm trying to set up on my end. I'm going to go back to doing some of my recorded content and also some reaction content as well. So let me know, what are some things you want to learn about? What leaders do you want to learn more about in terms of how they communicate? What are some things you should do? What are some things that you shouldn't do? And etc. Regardless of where you are in the world, as long as there's a couple of videos on them, I can give you some insights to help you there and just provide you with as much depth as I can. I know on the lives, they're a lot of fun, but I know sometimes my audience, they want to have something that's just very short, very concise, without necessarily a lot of engagement. So I'm still going to be doing my lives as normal, but I am going to start going back to doing a bit more of my pre-recorded videos to support you all on your journey and help you all as much as I can, in addition to the free ebook podcast coming up here very, very soon. Hopefully, I mentioned Q1. It might be Q2 probably before I actually release that. But the podcast I'm really excited about because I think that will give you all some good insight in terms of how to have really difficult conversations and learn it from other people that's been in those very high level leadership roles and how they had them and etc. I appreciate you all so much for being here. Kat, thank you so much for some of your amazing insights as always, and some really great ideas for future sessions that we'll plan on having. So I will see you all tomorrow for Q&A. It'll be Q&A in the morning, Q&A in the afternoon. If there's anything else that comes up for you, let me know. Thank you for the heart emojis, friends, and I will see you all in the next video. And Kat said, wow, podcast. Yes, absolutely. Kat, the podcast is going to be, what the structure of it is right now, my plan for it is right now, is to, a lot of times leaders don't know how to have hard conversations because we're just not taught how to have hard conversations, which is why I'm so passionate about what I do in terms of helping you communicate more confidently and concisely under pressure. But in the podcast, sometimes we have to learn from other people, and we can only learn so much by having just a dialogue. Sometimes you do learn more when you are having a conversation with someone that's been in it, where they give you a scenario, what happened to them, how they made their decision, how they had that hard conversation. Because I see leaders struggle with this so much, to where I'm going to start having the podcast, interviewing people that have been in leadership roles, or if you have someone that's been in leadership roles, or etc., when they have had hard conversations. I feel like the more people I can get on my podcast that have been in really hard conversations, the more people will start to learn and say, oh, I remember them talking to this person in the academic industry, or that was a dean at a college, or someone that was a business owner, or someone that worked in healthcare, and they had a hard conversation. So now I know that I'm in this industry. These are some things I might want to think about as a hard conversation. I genuinely believe that this will be very, very helpful. Cat 23 says, will it be fan interactive? Well, yes. So it'll probably be something. I definitely want to hear from everybody and hear what they have to say. I am going to focus on, there's a couple leaders I already have identified that will be really, really good to hear on the podcast, because the people I'm trying to reach out to have really led huge teams or huge universities and etc. So this is something that it'll be fun. It will probably be pre-recorded, But if you all have some comments, or you have some individuals, or you've been in situations like that where you've had these very, very hard conversations as a leader, let me know, because the more people that I'm able to interview on my podcast, the more people that will have their message out there, the more people that will learn how to start having hard conversations. And over time, you'll start to develop a trend or a framework, because how people interact with difficult conversations sometimes can be very, very different, but there's this one thing you find that is very, 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 very similar. So it'll be pretty fun. So I'm looking forward to helping you all with that. Hopefully things will kick off in quarter two, hopefully. So I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now.